Welcome back, everybody, to me talking about, well, books and other stuff. Today, this is a bit of a spontaneous one, so if you're new here, welcome. Maybe like, subscribe, comment, share, be angry at me or something. I do talk about books, sometimes about music, and associated things. And today this is going to be a generic one. I'm also doing, the Wheel of Time read-along thing, and there will be a video about that later tonight. I just, have to finish reading the first quarter of Path of Daggers. I'm like halfway through that, and it'll happen today. But now to something that I just thought about and that I want to talk about a bit more. So, let's do this, shall we? Cheers. Alright, so what am I going to talk about today? It's a bit of a follow-up to my Brandon Sanderson video. This will not be about the same subject as such. It was just inspired by the video and the comments I got. So yeah, thank you for all of you who commented there. I tried to interact with all of you, but I'm sometimes slow with answering to comments. I do read all of them though. Don't worry. I mean, usually it's 1 or 2 comments, so I'm fine with that, right? However, it's a bit of a larger thing about it, and like the response to Brandon Sanderson's Kickstarter and all of that stuff. And there's a few things that I want to look at here. And that is how we treat authors and whether that has changed over time. And I do think it has, and I do foresee certain consequences to that. And I think it's important to, talk about those, think about those, and do these things consciously and not subconsciously, or, without thinking about it first, right? What do I mean? All right. I want to look at the fame of authors. Now, here's an interesting thing in general. I think that over time, and I think this is an ongoing, longer process, right? We as people have always tried to, exalt people, worship people. It's in there somewhere. Terry Pratchett says like the built-in part of the human body to bend at the knees, and we have shifted a lot of that veneration or whatever to artists of one sort or another. Some obviously have always been easier to fawn over. In the last century, I think it has definitely speeded up over the last centuries through mass media, different mass media. It starts out with, printing newspapers and stuff, and then we move to radio, television, cinema, and finally the internet, which is sort of where we are right now. But we have certainly shifted a lot of our veneration, allegiance, and so forth towards artists. And I'm using that term very broadly, like performers of art, creators of art. Obviously, the big one from the last century would definitely be actors and musicians. Rock stars and famous actors, I guess, are the easiest example to look at. Others, maybe not so much because their niche is smaller. I'm pretty sure that, obviously there were famous painters, say, around the surrealists in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s in Paris and afterwards. Those people were definitely, as artists, as visual artists in a lot of ways, treated like rock stars in a lot of ways, and venerated, worshipped almost. I'm using those religious terms for a reason here, right? You see that Salvador Dali, Pablo Picasso, those are absolute rock stars of the art world in a way, and they behaved in that way. So it is definitely something that you can see outside of just actors and musicians. But those are probably the ones that come easiest to mind. It has, now with the 21st century being on, we also have people, YouTubers, social media stars and shit like that going down, right? That are worshipped in all kinds of ways. And personally, I don't mind that being the case. You could go and make a more cynical argument that humans like to worship something, and with, religion kind of fading into the background, and all kinds of other aspects, authority figures being less of a thing, monarchy being abolished in a lot of countries and stuff like that. We need some other focus for that inner tendency of, faith and worship. But I don't want to make that claim. I just say that this is one possible way to look at it, a very cynical one indeed. However, let's just assume that we as people like to look up to other people. And that's fine. Now, I want to look at authors today, books, because of the Brandon Sanderson thing. Because Brandon Sanderson is very much a new model in that regard. Like, I still don't think he's changed publishing, but he certainly is in a lot of ways, an author that can be seen as a product or like an example of the 21st century, an author of the 21st century. I'll also quickly look at J.K. Rowling, I guess, and so forth. But, my point here is that we have come to a situation where authors, as the creators of books, have once more become stars. That has obviously been in the past. I mean, I'm not calling Homer a rock star, but maybe that was the case. Who knows? Famous poets certainly behaved like that. Your Lord Byrons and whatnot, although obviously those people had the advantage of already being rich and whatnot before. But, it has also happened with writers. But over the last, I would say, 50, 60 years maybe, when writers and books have sort of declined or shared public attention with movies, music, and all of that stuff, because those things suddenly became a possibility to be shared, right? Up to, say, the invention of, before we figured out how to record music, you could only see music in live performances, but once that stuff could be published and mass-produced and reproduced, we only have that much attention as humans, I think, and so writing and books have sort of slipped as lost their place as the number one entertainment and art that is shared and can be reproduced, I guess. But we come to the point where once again authors become more popular, and that's sort of what I want to look at here. And that also has to do, I think, with the creation of the intellectual property of the canon and so forth. And that's something that I usually lay at the feet of George Lucas, but there's more of those kind of things, right? Where suddenly people build up what you might call a fandom. And once again, you can go back as a historian and find all kinds of aspects of that or facets of that, all the way back to this, the 18th century, right? Where you can find people suddenly becoming fans or influenced by a specific piece of work. In Germany, there's always obviously Goethe and the suffering of young Werther, like Die Leiden des jungen Werther, where you have exactly that, where people reproduce stuff, and it has been there for a while. But through the element of social media and the internet, these kind of things have been accelerated and exaggerated to all really new global levels, I guess. And this is what I want to look at here today. So what we find is a human tendency to elevate creators or to elevate people above ourselves, to venerate them, worship them, and so forth. We also find this process exaggerated and accelerated through social media, which globalizes this thing way more on a more democratic level. It's I can talk to other people that worship the same person face to face, not face to face, but computer to computer on the other end of the planet, right? And that suddenly makes us realize that there's way more of these people out there that worship the same person. It makes fandom more powerful and more cohesive in a lot of ways. And that is important because through social media, where suddenly everyone has a voice, that fandom can be heard more and more. Plus, the author or the object of veneration of a specific fandom can also communicate with those people directly, not just through writing letters or publishing books or whatever, but through social media, interviews, all of that stuff. It's a product of the 20th century, and, you know, I'm not going to trash capitalism for it today, but yeah, right? What I want to look at, however, is that over time, with some aspects of that, we have left behind the idea of separating art and artist, or sometimes come back to it, but come back to it the wrong way. By which I mean, we are no longer fans of Mistborn, the Stormlight Archives, whatever else there is. But we suddenly are fans of an author, of the person. Suddenly it's no longer appreciation for the writings, but for the writer, which is sort of basically not death of the author, but death of the of the book, I guess, death of the text in a way. And once again, that is something that happens, that we see through, like, over the last couple of, decades, I would say, mostly through the internet, and especially with large and powerful fandoms, I guess, like Harry Potter, Twilight, possibly even Hunger Games, although I'm not quite sure with that one, because I felt like Suzanne Collins never, did that much interaction with fans like Stephanie Meyer did at the beginning, and J.K. Rowling still kind of does. However, we also see this with other smaller fandoms, and don't get me wrong, it's like, we have people in, say, the Malazan fandom that are, like, worshipping the ground Steven Erikson walks upon, and then lash out against Cam Esselman, but that's a different story. Point is, it is a tendency that through authors being active in social media has been once again accelerated and has become more pronounced in a way. And I do see problems with that. And that's the point where we start to once again trash capitalism, because unfortunately I do have to. That's, the disadvantage of, like, making this stuff up as I go along. I don't know what I'll be saying in the next minute. And here's where we can talk about, once again, Daniel Green's did Sanderson publish change publishing? Well, he didn't, but, maybe he changed marketing. And we see other people in comments and so forth do the same thing. And this is because of capitalism and the way it works right now, especially in the entertainment industry. It is highly desirable to further this cult of the personality, to make it way more about the author than the book. It's the same thing in music. It's like, marketing for music has shifted to social media, and it's not about making Facebook ads or Twitter ads or whatever. It's very much about making the creator of the piece of art, the artist, a personable person, to create a specific bond between the reader or the consumer at this point, because we need to talk about this in terms of economics. Make the consumer feel personally connected to the creator of the piece of art. And you do that through personal social media, obviously. And we have seen the fact, that some authors that are more personable on social media or have an easier time using it for whatever reasons. And once again, using social media is a skill. It's a talent, because it's, coming across as natural, coming across as, relatable, I guess, as authentic in a way, is a huge part of this. And as I said, it is highly desirable. We've come to the point where publishers require their authors to have a Twitter profile and to use Twitter and to use other forms of social media as part of a contract. That's a thing, because publishers have realized that furthers sales. If I can read the thoughts of Steven Erikson boiled down to 280 characters, or is it 280, 250, whatever Twitter uses these days? That may make me buy his next book, even though I'm not sure if I want to read it, just because the guy comes across as personable. And some people are naturally better at this than others. Brandon Sanderson, apart from having a huge readership, has always done this. And, Daniel Green was right in pointing that out. It's like Brandon Sanderson has done his like lectures, he's put them on YouTube, he's done live streams, interacting with his fans in that way. But all of that is about the person Brandon Sanderson. It's no longer about the Cosmere or whatever else he's been writing that is not Cosmere. As I said, I've only read like 4 Mistborn novels, so I'm not an expert on Sanderson there, and I don't want to talk about like that specifically. But I want to point out that it is very much about the person Brandon Sanderson in the first place, and about the work afterwards. And once you create that bond to the specific person, that person can then use their name basically as a brand. There's other famous authors out there that could do the same thing. Stephen King, I would definitely say, although Stephen King, being older, probably doesn't need to use the internet in that way. Just too old, I guess. These things kind of change. But there's others that do that. And those people can then leverage their name and the trust in their name for crowdfunding, for example. And as I said, it works the same way with musicians, with bands. There's bands out there that are extremely good at it, like my friends from A Sound of Thunder, which are insanely good at social media marketing because they're the kind of persons to whom that kind of stuff comes more or less naturally. And that's perfect. They've built a brand that allows them to exist in that way. And it is fine to use that method. I just want to focus on the fact that that shift from art to artist and the almost religious worship that some fans will bring towards those artists has all these downsides, because we don't talk about the art at this point. We talk about what does Brandon Sanderson do, or about what's in the next book he's written. And as someone who is very much interested in books and thoughts in books, that is a bit difficult. The other part, obviously, is that focus on a specific person gives that person a lot of power. It's the whole platform power dynamic argument. If Brandon Sanderson he never would, I'm pretty sure, would go out and call out one YouTuber or someone out there, even another author, for something personal, right? If Brandon Sanderson would go out there and call out who's writing? George R. Martin for not writing as quickly as he does. You can bet your ass that like a large part of his social media following would go and then send all kinds of hate mail to George R. Martin, which I guess isn't a big deal because he's probably getting like tons of the stuff anyway. But you know what I mean? There is suddenly power because we built this almost religious following in a way as a person, and it has happened with authors at this point. And that's what I'm concerned about. So, because I'm rambling, let's try to make this clearer and sum it up again. We can see a tendency over the last centuries that belief, and not belief, but worship has shifted towards secular people. Artists being very like upfront there in that region. Sports, like athletes as well, but I'm talking artists here, right? And it has always happened mostly to rock stars and whatnot, but it has also happened to authors. Social media, because it is very much about our personalities, as individuals, has, I feel, accelerated and exaggerated that trend. And it has affected artists, it has affected authors. And with that come advantages and disadvantages. The problem is that capitalism and the market force or encourage authors to do that and to make it more about themselves than their books. If the goal is to sell as many books as possible, obviously, and make money, which for those who try to be professional authors, up to a point, that is the case. And my problem with that is that it gives authors powers that they might not have thought about, which is exactly the power to send a large mob of people to brigade someone else if they so choose. Once again, Brandon Sanderson has not done this, and I'm not accusing him of it. Not anyone else either that I'm aware of right now. I'm pretty sure they exist, but They come with that. The second part is that we lose, with shifting our focus from the actual books towards the person, being the person becomes actually their work, their job, not writing really good books. It's just an accessory. It shifts that. It could lead to lesser quality in books, possibly. but it definitely leads to the discourse being less about the art and more about the artist, which I personally just find sad, because I like to talk about the books and not so much about, you know, the person, because frankly, I don't care about the person in a lot of cases. So there's that aspect, and far from, you know, denouncing all of this, I just want to have a discussion about it. And if you think that I'm onto something here, that I think it's important to be aware of that, and yeah, where this will be going in the future. So yeah, at this point, I'll just end this ramble, and would really like to hear your thoughts on the matter. Once again, this is not about Brandon Sanderson. I just think he's a good example because, you know, he's probably the most popular and successful fantasy writer, and I am still very much, you know, connected to fantasy. But it is something that I've seen with other authors as well. So yeah, there we are. I would love to hear your thoughts on it. Please leave them in the comments, and yeah, see you soon. Cheers.